Monis, Rehman, could you join me on stage? Monis will be helping us answer the question of hiring, the ultimate question in Pakistan. Monis is one of Pakistan's internet pioneers. He has founded 3 venture-backed startups in Pakistan, including Rosie, Finja, and is currently full-time CEO at Dukaan. Join me right here. Special seat for you. Joining Monis is Muneeb Maayr. He's the founder of Baikia. Big round of applause. Halima, Iqbal, CEO and founder of Uran. Meenah, Tariq, CEO and co-founder of Metric. Omair Ansari, CEO and co-founder of Abhi, which raised Series A funding of 17 million and onboarded 300 plus companies. And Yasir, Memon, co-founder of Jugdu and Salesflow.
Hello. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's my profound honor and pleasure to be here and to moderate this panel. I've gotten to know these amazing entrepreneurs on stage quite well over the years. And that's why I say that it's an honor being here and being able to talk to them. They've all done amazing things in their space. They're at various stages of their organizations. I've learned from all of them. Despite everything that's happened in the last 2 years, a lot of the founders on the stage have really shown us what it is to try to build sustainable organizations with a great value, and they keep growing. So the panel today is Fit to Scale, Hiring Hacks for Scaling. So I'm going to take a bit of a tangent onto that, and it's really about creating teams and growing teams and sustaining them. And a lot's happened over the last 2 years. We all know investment has come in. We've had a lot of new entrepreneurs enter the scene doing great stuff. We've had our challenges as an ecosystem. It's had challenges on everybody, the founders as well as employees. So HR, I think, is right at sort of center stage in everything we're doing. So to kick things off, I would like to start with Meenah, and I would request all of our founders on stage, if you could spend 2 minutes so we can ask a lot more questions, to just introduce what you do, what your startup does, and if you could talk to us at about sort of how much you have raised to date. And I'm asking about raising not because I think raising how much you've raised is important as a metric, but it's important to understand what that means in terms of hiring. And then I'd like, just very quickly on the back of that, to tell us how you hired your first few initial employees. And I'm only giving you 2 minutes to do that, sorry, because I've got a lot more interesting things to ask you. So Meenah, over to you.
Sure, hello. Hi everyone, thank you so much, Monis. This is going to be a fun panel. So my name is Meenah Tariq. I'm the CEO of Metric. Metric is the world's most founder-friendly business accounting app. We're built for emerging markets and for non-accounting founders to be able to manage their bookkeeping, to manage their finances, and to be able to make better business decisions based on extremely relevant real-time data and metrics. We started off June of last year. We raised our pre-seed round. At the start of this year, we raised under $1 million. So $912,000 exactly is how much we raised. And yeah, so because we started about 6 months before we raised, we'd already started building a team, before. And our first few hires were actually, because we were bootstrapped up until that point, we'd started taking on clients. And so a lot of them were accountants that were servicing those clients, and then some tech team members who had started building out a prototype of our app itself.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you found a way to sort of accelerate your hires by working with people that you already had worked with. So they assimilated very quickly. I think that's great. It's brilliant. Halima.
Thank you. I'm Halima Iqbal. I'm the CEO and founder of Uran. Uran is Pakistan's first women-led, women-first financial technology company where we take a savings-first approach and provide financial services to the entire household. Till date, we have raised about $4.6 million. And in terms of hiring for the first few people on the team, For us, it was really going out and understanding and finding like-minded people who would be facing similar kinds of problems as women were facing in this ecosystem, and really building from there in terms of what values do they bring to the table, how are we catering to the customers, and do they really believe in that problem?
That's fantastic. So this is another great example. So you actually hired the sort of people that were your clients, so you could understand how to interact with your clients.
Yeah.
That's great, it's brilliant. Muneeb, we can learn a lot from you. How did you hire your first few employees? And a bit about what you do.
So I think most of you are probably familiar with Psyche just because it's a public consumer brand that's visible, as opposed to many of the B2B companies that, on this panel that you don't get to see on the road all the time. But when we started, we obviously were not a brand, I think when we were trying to find talent to work with us, we were trying to find talent that would be completely opposite of, or would have a skill that would be completely opposite of a skill that I wouldn't have or another member wouldn't have, right? So for example, if I can communicate, then I also need someone who doesn't communicate as much, but thinks about things, so that can be a balance. If I don't know how to code, I need somebody on the team who can code. If I am not great at doing a financial model, I need someone who's going to be great at that. And I think it's very important to hire people who have very different skills from you, because if you have the same skills, you'll compete and you'll have a fight.
That's great. So finding people who have complementary skills. That's great. Omair, you've executed amazingly well. You've grown very quickly, and it's been really interesting studying how carefully you've hired in a very sort of thoughtful manner. So would love to hear your story and how you hired your first few.
Thanks, Monis. Yeah, I'm Omair, CEO, co-founder of Abhi. We are a fintech B2B2C lending platform helping SMEs as well as employees across the country. In terms of how we do our hiring, and it's almost because your question of how much we raise, you can Google how much we've raised, but the point is that our KPI is not how many people we hire, it's how many effective people we hire. I think there's a over-exaggeration or focus on companies and how many employees it can hire as fast as it can. A monkey can hire a lot of monkeys, but the point is you need to hire people around you that can help you build a business. So a key metric for us is revenues per employee and maximizing that. And that's what I care about, because it's very easy to hire, it's very hard to fire. So you're bringing on people, you need to make sure that you care about those individuals and they're adding to your business, otherwise there's no point in bringing them on.
Great, thank you. That's also very instructive. And I think a lot of us have seen a sort of inverse relationship between the number of people we hire and how quickly we grow. So that's an interesting thought to latch onto. Yasir, you've been doing this for a while. You've built two great organizations. Would love to hear how you started.
Yes, thank you so much, Monis. My name is Yasir. I'm the co-founder of Salesflow and Jugnu, focusing all my energies on Jugnu lately. But yes, we had the opportunity to hire in two different sort of dynamics. In 2015, when we were in a bootstrapping mode, the hiring strategies were very different. The people that we were looking after was also very different. And then Jugnu, when we actually had certain capital raised and then being able to hire in a very different mode. Something that's really common in the two is that you should always remember that you are actually hiring to get a job done. The team that you're bringing in is going to be the one that is going to be creating that impact. So you're not hiring as an outcome, you're hiring as a means to that outcome that you want to deliver, the very purpose that you're going to be delivering for. So that's something that remains, constant, that remains a common area. But what really changes is that the quality of talent, or let's say the ripe talent that you can actually bring in, changes when you have, venture-backed or when you have capital raised, versus being able to, having to raise those people and then ripening them up. So given that in most of the areas that we operate, we have not had a playbook. So we've had a lot of focus on hiring fresh talent and really being able to work on that, clean canvas and build them up, and working more as an institution. In the Jugnu journey, we've of course been very, very lucky, and I think something that we can refer to back to the previous panel discussion. Institutions like Kareem, Airlift, no matter how we say that, if they've not been able to deliver the key outcome that they were set out to do, they have contributed significantly to the ecosystem in terms of creating a huge talent base that is available for all of us. So we all, as startups, have benefited from that, and we continue to do that.
Great, excellent. Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a clear theme that as startups grow and hire, they produce resources for the entire ecosystem that we in turn can grow and hire, and new startups grow with that experience. But with that, I want to just move to a little bit of a tangent. We've raised a tremendous amount of VC funding in this country over the last 2 or 3 years. A lot has happened. We've learned which spaces work, which ideas don't work. Mistakes have been made, but that rapid influx of capital has changed the psyche, I think, in terms of how we hire, who we hire, how they react. And I think as entrepreneurs, we continually learn. So the question I'd like to ask is, what were some of the things that you looked for when you hired, when you first started a few years ago? And how has that changed in terms of how you're perceiving the psyche of the workforce and expectations and abundance or scarcity of it? So I'd like to hear how you used to hire before and what you've learned and that you've changed now. So maybe if we start with Halima.
So for us, and I think what Omair and Muneeb also said, we have always hired for a attitude and also getting the job done, right? Understanding what are the skill sets that us as founders might not necessarily have, and how can we find that complement in people that we are bringing on, and do they have the right attitude? Especially early stage startups where we would go for more utility over specialization, and making sure that anybody who's coming in is a generalist who deeply believes in the problem that we're solving for, and will continue to have the same kind of a passion with us whether the markets are up or down. Because even when the markets are up, and when we saw last year where things were going in the positive direction, there was still a lot of distraction, especially from a talent perspective, right? So how do you make sure that that talent is retained, is motivated, and is not being, their incentives are not around just monetary incentives. They really, really want to create value. So we continue to think around that perspective, like, is the attitude right? What are the values of that person coming in? Do they believe in the problem that we're solving for? Do they bring complementary skill sets to the table so that we become a stronger team, and the foundation of our management team or the culture that we're building, they become champions of that? Great.
Okay, great. So I mean, I think a lot of us who have been hiring agree that when this rapid influx of investment came in, a lot of amazing people joined the entrepreneurial ecosystem as employees who worked for large organizations that paid well. And there were certain expectations. And when the downturn happened, we found that a lot of our employees didn't have the sort of will or a desire to ride the downturn. So yeah, I do agree with that. Omair, how has the attitude of the workforce changed from when you started to where it is now, and how have you realigned your hiring?
So we're still early stages, despite us having raised some money. But the point is, hire missionaries, not mercenaries, at the beginning. And that goes to Halima's point of the idea that there are downturns, and what has changed in the last 2 years, and honestly why, even though when we launched we had money to hire people, we didn't go from first was about 6 people. It took us a very long time to go from 6 to say 30 people, despite everyone else around us hiring on a crazy frenzy in the last 2 years. Why? Because expectations were mismatched. There were companies that were giving increments every 2 months. I remember a specific example of someone we were going to hire for a UI UX job. They were earning, say, 100 at the place they were before. We offered them 140. They came back and said, well, someone else has offered us 450. So that was irrational in terms of that hiring environment. So what's changed now is, at least from a market perspective, is I think rationality has set in. And you're able to get more of those missionaries versus mercenaries. And we've always been focused on missionaries to come and join our company. And so we've been very selective of who we bring in.
Great, yeah. So, I think there was a sort of a fear amongst founders of being called bad employers because we weren't matching salaries that were rising incredibly fast because maybe we didn't raise as much as other startups who were able to do that. And now, at hindsight, maybe it was prudent to not raise those salaries at the same rate as the market was growing. Yasir, any views on that? You're in a space that's a competitive space. A lot of investment's been raised in the space. I'm sure you had to deal with this.
I think a very relevant point also mentioned by Omair, hire for a purpose. If you really are, if an employee is coming in for the money and is not able to relate to the purpose, you will never be able to retain that talent, and you will never be able to get them to change the world. End of the day, the outcome that you're all out to deliver is basically deliver that value proposition to your customer, to create that value, to change that world. Now, yes, we do face a lot of challenges when there is like a price war, there's a talent war, and someone that jumps ship for let's say coming in at 200K into the market, in 6 months gets 400K, and then in a couple of months is being offered 800K. Yeah. That does happen. It all goes back in terms of how strongly are you able to communicate and instill the mission and the purpose of the company into your people. So if you have these missionaries, if you have all the people chasing that common purpose, we have had times where our talent would not even want to go for an interview call because they get to be so emotionally attached to the mission that they do not want to really shift. Having said that, it is not that this does not create a disruption, it does not create a lot of noise in the system. It does create a lot of noise. Benchmarking your pay slabs does become very difficult at times because yes, that is a space that when it heats up, it creates all sort of challenges. But what we've saw is that the stronger the association with the purpose and the mission, the stronger the commitment, and the less likely you are to be able to losing talent just because of someone giving a higher pay raise there. So it's all about that employee connect. It's all about that making sure that you have a lot of refounders into your organization rather than just having employees who are working for a paycheck.
I'd like to actually add to what Yasir also said there. I think we made a mistake last year, which I think many startups began to also make. And that was that we were being told that as you're growing, you need better talent within your organization. And that better talent would come from the large enterprise organizations that everyone recognizes. The big names, people who have experience, because a lot of the folks that you're working with are just not, leadership material, right? And I think in hindsight, what we did was absolutely wrong. We went out trying to get talent with a lot of experience at big companies. We paid them a lot of money. And we couldn't make them flexible to the culture that we had. They thought our culture was chaotic. They thought that basically the way we operated was that we kept changing our mind all the time. But that is the nature of who we are, right? We are around, we are in existence because we're so nimble. And I think if I were to rethink all of this, what do we really need, right? As you're getting to be a slightly larger organization, you need to for sure upskill your people, and you need to figure out how to upskill them. And one of the things we're trying now is to attach them with younger blood coming out of universities and colleges that has technical skills that they don't, or has communication skills that they don't, right? But I think the process of actually bringing in talent with a lot of experience is something that we at least struggle with. And I don't think that we would revert back to that philosophy till we are about to go public or something. Because that's when perhaps the world again starts saying, oh, what experience does this leadership come from?
There are some gems that we just heard. I agree so strongly with a lot of what we've just heard. And the first one is that hire people who genuinely believe in the mission of the company. That's sustainable. That allows you to scale. And the other point is, when you have to hire senior people after you've scaled, and they may not believe in the company or the vision as strongly, but may have other sort of agendas, or agendas are probably a bad word, but reasons for joining, which may be salary or growth in careers and entering the new economy, often we make mistakes. And I've also experienced hiring very senior people externally, and I've really come to the conclusion that we need to grow our senior people internally if we can, and maybe even stretch them, because the value alignment is very strong. So now I'm going to come to something that I think everybody shares, the pain point, and the dynamics have shifted dramatically for software programmers who we're hiring for our tech teams. I mean, if we look at the changes that's happened, or the change that's happened over the last few years in any area, software programming has changed the most. I think it's changed, one, because the demand for software programmers has skyrocketed, not just in Pakistan, but globally. And we're competing with employers paying their employees in dollars, which is appreciating against our rupee. And if you're paying in rupees, you're at a drawback. And we have software outsourcing firms who are paying them much higher because it's an arbitrage. And now we're finding software engineers are going directly to end clients to do projects for them and being paid in dollars at astronomical amounts. So it's made it very hard to hire. This is all compounded by the fact that I've always been saying to my software engineers, and I'm also an engineer, how many software engineers are there in the audience? So software engineers, we have a different DNA in terms of how we're managed and hired and deployed. It is a different beast. And so, Meenah, I'd like to ask you, what sort of changes have you experienced in terms of hiring for tech talent? Mm-hmm. And how are you meeting your need for tech talents amidst this sort of massive change in expectation and behavior?
Okay. So yeah, I'm going to switch between English and Urdu because I feel like I can be funnier in Urdu, and I like being funny when I'm on panels. I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey, especially because Omair and I are both non-tech founders, ठीक है? तो जब हमने शुरू किया तो हमारे पास पैसे नहीं थे. This is pre-raising funding, right? उमर ने अपनी जॉब छोड़ी, मेरी जॉब से हम चीज़ें चला रहे थे, और वही हमने कुछ अकाउंटेंट्स एक दोस्त के ऑफिस के छोटे से कमरे में बिठाए, and we started off. And then we were trying to figure out how to build the app itself, so we tried to outsource it. पहले हमने एक firm ढूंढी, उनको हमने दिया, and then we realized, नहीं हो रहा था. And then we said, okay, we're going to hire a few developers. हम Android app बना रहे थे, तो हमने कहा हम Android developers hire करते हैं, और उनको हम बिठाएंगे और वो बना देंगे और सब कुछ ठीक हो जाएगा. अच्छा, हमने शुरू किया एजेंसीज. तो पाकिस्तान में ज़्यादातर आपके पास सॉफ्टवेयर हाउसेज हैं जहाँ से आप टैलेंट तोड़ने की कोशिश कर रहे होते हो. अब we would offer them more money than they were earning at that software house. सारा मेरी सैलरी में से आ रहा था, but we would still try to offer them more money, thinking that maybe that's what would attract them. We would also offer them, great culture, and we can talk about culture later and what we mean by great culture. But we kept offering all of these things, and people kept turning us down. Like, they would turn up for the interview, and they would like us and everything, but then they wouldn't join us. They would stay at that same software house where they were earning less money, had to clock in, clock out, very strict hours and everything, but they wouldn't come to us. And then we have a mentor, it was Omar's previous partner at High Output Ventures. He told us this. He said, listen, when you want to hire tech talent, you hire the top first. And then you let them build the team. Because जो young tech वाले लोग हैं ना, उनको कोई भाई या बाजी चाहिए होती हैं जिनके साथ मिल के they want to work. They don't want to work for non-tech founders जो उनको कुछ सिखा नहीं सकेंगे. So they're like, that's how they operate. तो उनको पहले आप कोई भाईजान ला के दें, या कोई कोई ऐसी कोई और ला के दें जिनसे वो सीखने में, who can inspire them to work. And so we scrapped our original plan of trying to hire like junior Android developers. And then we convinced our CTO to join us. We said, we really need somebody senior. She's a PhD in data science and artificial intelligence. She's a computer scientist. She's very senior. She came on board. Then she brought the head of engineering on board, who honestly, I think he joined because he wants to learn from her, and he's interested in AI and data science. He joined because of her, and then he was the bhaijan that then ended up forming the rest of the team. So for us, it was quite a learning curve. And I think, again, as non-tech founders, आपको कोई बहुत शायद 6 महीने पहले, साल पहले हमें नहीं पता था कि ये team कैसे बनेगी. But we went through that process. Now we have coders in our team. जो somebody was describing somebody in our team recently and said, ये अपने code को ऐसे देखता है जैसे इसकी जायदाद हो. He takes so much ownership of his code कि जिस तरह इसकी वाकई ये जायदाद हो. But that formation, that cohesion has come after a year of existence now, and with the Bhaijan and Badi Baji leading the team.
Yeah, so I mean, spot on. I think for founders who don't have a tech sort of a background, to manage software engineering teams can initially be very daunting because it's very hard to filter what's true, correct, your timelines. You don't know if you're being spun or not spun, and trust and sort of respect that goes sort of both ways. So I agree. Omair, you are a financial genius, and you have now become a tech genius as well. You've built some very complicated stuff, but you've learned this. We've been friends a while now, so I've seen this. So what have you seen in terms of the behavioral shift in your tech resources and your ability to grow that team?
Firstly, I'm no genius at all, but thank you for that. I think it goes into what Muneeb was saying earlier as well, which I want to touch on, is know yourself is really important, which means know your weaknesses. So when I entered into this, let me be very clear. So when I started this, my background was in finance. I had no entrepreneurial experience. I had no operational experience in Pakistan. I had no coding experience. I can barely do memes. And so for me, I knew that these were my weaknesses. If I would be idiotic for me to step into this to try and launch something without surrounding myself with people who were better at that than I was. So 2 people I hired right away was my operational co-founder, who has operational experience over here, who really helps run the business over here. And then technology. So exactly right. Technology, I still can't code. I've tried free code and all this. It doesn't work for me. And I've come to grips with that. That's all right. But I made sure that, exactly to the point, hire someone senior who understands what they're doing, has the work ethic to get done what we need to accomplish, and hire accordingly to their requirements. I have no idea how to, that's one area where I've sat in on a lot of interviews. I still to this day have no idea how to interview someone on the software side, very plainly, because it's just, that's not my forte, and that's okay. So what you need to do is make sure that you allow them to have mentorship within the company and also externally. So the other aspect which I do, which I make sure, is we've been very blessed by having a very strong shareholder base. And the purpose for that is beyond just capital. They've invested in companies that are leaps and bounds ahead of us in other markets. And so connectivity to senior management within those companies, within the tech side, within the operational side, et cetera, is very important, because that allows them to do, we have simple pattern recognition, says this is what you look like in 3 years' time. Hey, how do we build this so that we're able to build a formidable organization over the long run? And so I think that's where you really need to make sure you take advantage of, one, your investor base, as well as your internal network.
I'll sort of add to that as
Please.
well, because I mean, the thing is, if you look at Omair, if you look at myself, if you look at actually everyone on this panel, except for maybe Monis, none of us are actually engineers. Right? And so why are we on this panel? Like, this is a startup panel, right?
Yeah, you're an engineer, Muneeb. I've seen you work on product, man. You're hardcore.
And that's what I was going to sort of like point this to. Okay? I think, what is your expectation from this engineer? Okay? अगर तो आप समझते हो कि जी मैं इसको कुछ समझा दूंगा और वो खुद बना लेगा, it's a wrong expectation. right? Because اگر ان کی وہ ایکسپرٹیز ہوتی تو وہ اپنا پروڈکٹ بنا رہے ہوتے کسی ٹھیکیدار کے پاس سروس آرگنائزیشن میں کام نہ کر رہے ہوتے, رائٹ؟ بیکاز پاکستان میں اور انڈیا میں پریڈامنٹلی اور ایون یوکرین میں اور رومینیا میں پرائمرلی ہم لوگ پروڈکٹس نہیں بناتے, گورے پروڈکٹس بناتے ہیں. ادھر کوئی نہ کوئی بیسکلی بندہ بیٹھ کے ڈاکیومنٹ ڈیزائن کرتا ہے, اس کی ایپک لکھتا ہے, اس کو جیرا ٹکٹ لکھتا ہے, اور اس کے بعد جو ہے ہم لوگ جو ہے ورکرز ہوتے ہیں, ٹھیک ہے. تو اگر اس میں یہ کیپیبلٹی ہوتی کہ وہ خود کریٹو کچھ چیز بنا سکتا تو خود ہی بنا رہا ہوتا, ٹھیک ہے. سو پریڈامنٹلی 95% آف انجینئرز پاکستان میں خاص کر کچھ بنانے وہ انتظار کریں کہ ان کو کوئی کچھ بتائے گا کہ کیا بنانا ہے, ٹھیک ہے. اور اس پینل پہ جتنے لوگ ہیں وہ پرائمرلی بتاتے ہیں کہ کیا بنانا ہے. اینڈ آئی تھنک اف یو آر ایکسپیکٹنگ کہ انجینئرنگ سیلریز کم ہوں گی, گلوبلی زیادہ ہو گئی ہیں. کیوں زیادہ ہو گئی ہیں؟ کیونکہ جیسے ریسیشن ہوئی ہے ویسٹ میں تو تنخواہیں بیسکلی کم کرنے کے لیے وہ آؤٹ سورسنگ شروع کر رہے ہیں انڈیا میں, پاکستان میں, رومینیا میں, جہاں بھی ان کو سستا کوئی بندہ مل جائے گا, چاہے اس کو انگریزی آتی ہو کہ نہ آتی ہو, ٹھیک ہے. تو جن کو انگریزی آتی نہیں بھی ہے ان کی بھی تنخواہیں بڑھ گئی ہیں پاکستان میں, تو کسی کے لیے بھی باہر دنیا میں کام کر سکتے ہیں. سو آپ نے ان کا ٹائم ایفیشینٹلی استعمال کرنا ہے. ایفیشینٹلی تب استعمال ہوگا جب یو ڈو دا ورک اینڈ یو ایز فاؤنڈرز اور بیسکلی لیڈرشپ اسپیک ایوری تھنگ آؤٹ, ٹھیک ہے. کیا پروٹوٹائپ گرافک ڈیزائنر کو ساتھ بٹھاؤ, پورے پروٹوٹائپس بناؤ, ہر کلک پہ کیا ہوگا, کیا کیا اس میں سینیریوز ہو سکتے ہیں, ٹھیک ہے. اگر وہ B2B پلیٹ فارم بھی ہے تو اس میں بھی ہر اسکرین کیا ہوگی, رائٹ. بیکاز فنڈامنٹلی موسٹ آف واٹ وی آر بلڈنگ از ایکچولی ناٹ انجینئرنگ کمپلیکس, اٹس جسٹ کہ یو نو the things have to be stitched together and it doesn't need to break down. That's really about it. I mean, you know, we also run seemingly a very complex software of matchmaking. But I'll tell you that it is not as complex as you would think it is. It looks complex, but it is not very complex. And many a times when people come to me and say, "Ji, AI or machine learning," میں کہتا ہوں بھائی if statement ہے. As a founder, اگر آپ if statement نہیں study کر سکتے تو وہ you know like that's your fault. You need to stop being lazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And we talk about AI, and I think very excited by AI. I remember talking to one of our team members, and he proposed to build this AI engine to do a certain task. And I looked at it, I said, you can do this with a if-then-else loop, and you'll be right 100% of the time. He said, yeah, you're right, but AI is cooler. So, I mean, you know, you have to make sure you're using things in the right space, and I think that's a bit of oversight that's needed when you have a business view of things.
If I can just quickly add to what Muneeb was saying. So actually, that's also why product teams have become so important now, to become that voice that is between the business side and the tech side. اور پروڈکٹ ٹیلنٹ اس وقت پاکستان میں بڑا فریش ہے اور نیو ہے. ابھی کافی مطلب وہی کیونکہ ہم پروڈکٹس بنا نہیں رہے تھے اس سے پہلے, اور کیونکہ اگین وہ مائنڈ سیٹ ہمارا وہ ایجنسی مائنڈ سیٹ ہے نا. مارکیٹنگ میں بھی جب آپ کسی کو ہائر کرتے ہو اس کا ایجنسی مائنڈ سیٹ, مور پرابلٹی دین ناٹ آپ کسی مارکیٹنگ ایجنسی سے کوئی اچھا پرسن لا رہے ہو, ایڈورٹائزنگ ایجنسی سے لا رہے ہو, ایجنسی مائنڈ سیٹ ہے. سافٹ ویئر ہاؤس سے بھی آتے ہیں, ایجنسی مائنڈ سیٹ ہوتا ہے. وہ آلموسٹ آپ کو شروع میں ایسے ٹریٹ کرتے ہیں جیسے آپ ان کے کلائنٹ ہو, یو نو, اور پھر آپ کو ان کو سمجھانا پڑتا ہے کہ نہیں ہم سارے ایک ٹیم کے اوپر ہیں. تو وہ پروڈکٹ پیپل درمیان میں ایڈ کرنے سے ایکچولی دا پروسیس ڈز بیکم بیٹر. اور پھر آپ کو بہت ارلی آن, مطلب ہمیں ابھی ویئر دا ینگسٹ اسٹارٹ اپ آن دا اسٹیج رائٹ ناؤ, ہمیں سال ہوا ہے, بٹ آئی تھنک پچھلے 3 مہینے میں ہم نے جتنا ٹائم پروڈکٹ پروسیسز بنانے میں لگایا ہے کہ ایگزیکٹلی ہر کسی کو پتہ ہو کہ کون سی چیز کیسے ٹیسٹ ہو کے کون سا فیچر. اور دوسری ہوتی ہے کہ آپ کا فیچر ایڈ کرنے کو بڑا دل چاہتا ہے. آپ کی کمپنی میں ہر بندہ اس کا دل چاہتا ہے ایک فیچر ہو یہ والا, جو میرے خیال میں بہت ضروری ہے. اور آپ ہر بندہ مطلب دے ول فائٹ فار اٹ. لائک اف یو ہائرڈ اے ٹیم دیٹ از ایکچولی پیشنیٹ, دے ول فائٹ فار دا فیچرز دے لو, رائٹ. اینڈ a lot of times then they will start getting direct with the tech team. وہ لنچ ٹائم پہ بیٹھے ہیں, ہمارے ہیڈ آف انجینئرنگ کو بتا رہے ہیں وہ میرے خیال میں اگر ایسا ہو تو کیا خیال ہے, وہ ہیڈ آف انجینئر. سو دیٹس وین تھنگس اسٹارٹ ٹو بریک ڈاؤن. سو ویری ارلی آن میکنگ شیور یو ہیو the structures and processes in place where business, product and tech are able to communicate well, are able to work together, understand that we are all on the same team and not clients for each other. That has to happen very early.
Yeah, you know, I think you need to be an arbitrator on like ہمارے یہاں بھی بیسی لڑائی ہو رہی ہوتی ہے کہ نہیں یار یہ بیسی ریڈیو ٹیب ہونا چاہیے کہ ڈراپ ڈاؤن ہونا چاہیے, رائٹ. And people obviously need to be that passionate, but you as the leader need to arbitrate it and say कि भाई 4 लोगों से जाके टेस्ट करके बताओ कि किसको ज़्यादा आसान लग रहा है.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, the hardest thing to do is to not add new features. There's a temptation to keep adding, and it's just a can of worms that keeps opening. So, I was speaking earlier about the panel we have today, and I was saying, I know almost all of you quite well, and I was saying this is probably the most authentic panel that we're going to have in this event. They're just amazing people. And, with that, I'd like to spice it up a little bit. We have a few minutes left. The past 2 years, all founders have faced a lot of HR people challenges and issues and transitions. I've seen things I've never seen in my career happen, over the last few years. So I think it's safe to say we've all had our ass kicked. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. So what I want to do is just sort of end it with everybody sharing a story about something that you've seen and you have handled, but was very unusual and you weren't ever expecting to see this.
So I'll go first.
Please.
अच्छा, so जब हमने स्टार्ट की मेट्रिक तो तब तो किसी ने मेट्रिक का नाम ही नहीं सुना हुआ था ना, तो पहले तो किसी को मनाना कि कोई हमारे साथ काम करना चाहे उस टाइम पर, that was the hard part. So when we used to hire people, like I said, we rented a room in a friend's office. उसका बिज़नेस अच्छा नहीं चल रहा था तो उसने सोचा एक कमरा वो रेंट करके थोड़ा सा रेवेन्यू कमा ले, और वहाँ पे हमने हायरिंग शुरू की. तो लोगों को यकीन ही नहीं आता था कि वी आर लेजिटिमेट कंसर्न. लोगों के साथ उनके पेरेंट्स आते थे, उनके स्पाउसेस आते थे टू मेक श्योर कि हम ह्यूमन ट्रैफिकिंग नहीं कर रहे. मतलब दैट्स व्हाट वी हैड टू फाइट एट दैट पॉइंट इन टाइम, राइट? जब हमने फंड रेज किया तो थिंग्स शिफ्टेड. सो इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग. और मर्सनरीज वर्सेस मिशनरीज की अभी बात हुई है, बट मेरी अपनी लर्निंग पिछले साल में ये हुई है कि जब हालात अच्छे होते हैं आपको तब भी मिशनरी ही चाहिए, और जब हालात बुरे होते हैं आपको तब भी मिशनरी ही चाहिए. जब हालात अच्छे थे, जब जनवरी में हमने फंड रेज किया तो एकदम से सबको लगा हम अमीर हो गए. मोनिस ने मुझे बताया था कि इनकी कंपनी में भी वो लोग कहते हैं पापा हम अमीर कब होंगे, हम बहुत सारे पैसे कब रेज करेंगे. सो सबको लगा हम अमीर हो गए हैं, और आपकी ओवरऑल कंपनी में एक सेंस ऑफ एंटाइटलमेंट, और ख़ास तौर पे उस टाइम पे ना जब सब कुछ बड़ा फिट जा रहा था. वो जी सादा पे ने मैकबुक्स दे दिए हैं, हम तो नोवोज ही देते हैं. मतलब हम 900,000 रेस किए हमने, थोड़े से पैसे हैं और चलाने भी हैं, इनसे ग्रोथ करनी है, हम नहीं दे सकते मैकबुक्स. बट एकदम से पीपल स्टार्टेड उस टाइम पे जनवरी में व्हेन थिंग्स वर सुपर रोजी, पीपल वुड कम टू अस एंड से ओ फलानी स्टार्टअप में तो ये हो रहा है, वो फलाने तो उनका तो स्नैक बार भी लगा होता है साइड पे, मफिन्स होते हैं. अगर कोक की वेंडिंग मशीन एक लगी हो और वो हार्डीज़ वाली हो ताकि पीच आइस टी भी हो उसके अंदर, इस तरह की रिक्वेस्ट आती थी हमारे पास. ठीक है, and you're like, भाई ये क्या हो रहा है, मतलब ये, and you realize that there's some people who really don't understand how this works, and that's also because we're a very young ecosystem, and as an early stage startup, people are looking at what's happening outside and absorbing it and thinking this is how it works. जब पहली कंपनी बंद हुई सब एकदम उन्होंने कहा, आप लोगों ने हमें कहना शुरू किया इस पे भी स्पेंडिंग कम कर देते हैं, ये क्यों कर रहे हैं. मतलब हमारी एम्प्लॉइज़ ने हमें आके कहना शुरू किया, नहीं आर यू श्योर यू वांट टू डू दिस, बिकॉज वो देखें फिर कंपनियां बंद हो जाती हैं, मतलब या आप पैसे सोच समझ के लगाएं. सो इट्स सो इंटरेस्टिंग. एंड ऑल्सो इट्स सो इंटरेस्टिंग, जब जनवरी में हमने हायरिंग की राइट आफ्टर आवर फंड रेज, उस वक्त शोर भी बड़ा मचता है, आप अखबारों में होते हैं, लोग आपके पास ईजिली ज्वाइन करना शुरू करते हैं. जब एयरलिफ्ट बंद हुई और फिर एक आध और ले ऑफ्स हुए, दोबारा हायरिंग मुश्किल हो गई. एज अ स्टार्टअप एक दफ़ा दोबारा लोगों ने कहना शुरू किया, नहीं देख लें, फिर स्टार्टअप तो बड़ी मतलब बड़ी आती जाती चीज़ है, अब कैसे हम मैं जैज़ छोड़ के कैसे आ जाऊँ आपके पास. सो इवन कन्विंसिंग पीपल एंड मैनेजिंग देयर एक्सपेक्टेशन ऑफ व्हाट working with you will look like for them changes so much on what's happening in the ecosystem outside and what other. So sorry I'm taking a little long, but जो missionaries वाली चीज़ है ना, as an early stage startup आपके incentives थोड़े से misaligned होते हैं. मैं थोड़ी सी इसकी अगर एग्जांपल दूँ, मैं अगर एक दुकान चलाती होती और मेरे पास कोई काम करता ना, तो उसको पता होता कि अगर ग्राहक आएंगे और हम चीज़ें बेचेंगे तो पैसे कमाएगी ये दुकान, और अगर दुकान पैसे कमाएगी तो मेरी तनख्वाह चलती रहेगी और मेरी नौकरी पक्की होगी. अगर मेरी दुकान का ख़र्चा पहले से पक्का सेट हुआ है और अगले 12 महीने के पैसे मेरी दुकान चले ना चले हमारे पास पक्के पड़े हैं, लोगों की तनख्वाहें चलती रहेंगी नो मैटर व्हाट, चाहे हमारी कंपनी पैसे कमाए ना कमाए. अनलेस people who work in my दुकान are missionaries या are really passionate about trying to sell that product or trying to build what we're trying to build, अगर वो मर्सनरी होंगे तो वो कहेंगे ठीक है फिर मतलब काम तो चलता ही रहेगा, मीना हमारा बर्न रेट कितना है, क्या हमारे पास कितने महीने के पैसे पड़े हुए हैं, तो बस ठीक है फिर चलाते रहो. आपकी अर्ली स्टेज स्टार्टअप में अगर शायद 2 मर्सनरीज आ जाए ना तो आपका बिजनेस डुबाने के लिए वो काफ़ी हो सकते हैं.
Spot on. I think you've said something so powerful, which is encapsulating everything I've been trying to say and express, but you've expressed it very eloquently. I think the expectations have changed dramatically. The workforce really expected a lot because they were seeing a lot of things happening, MacBooks flying around, various offers and benefits and crazy high sort of salaries. So we were losing our good people who said, well, I'm worth more. And that created a lot of stress, I think, on the entire ecosystem. I think there's a bit of a correction. And we've all learned that you want those people who believe, in sort of your mission. So I think that's really well stated. I'd like to sort of ask a few other people to share some stories. Anybody else have an interesting story for us around that?
I'll just take a few minutes. So basically, when we hired our first set of people, I think the first 3 hires, I remember, no one knew about our company. Venture capital, the word was unknown, and no one knew how rounds are raised. And I remember we got a hold of the GIK and LUM's, graduation alumni books, and we, parsed through a lot of profiles, and we would make calls to candidates that, can you please come over for an interview? And every time we would say, we used to be called Retailistan at the moment, and they used to say, Retailistan, what's that? We've never heard of that. And they would always think it's some sort of a bank fraud or something that, they're just going to call us in and they're going to kind of mug us or something. And we were here looking for people we could hire, and eventually, there was someone, I remember this categorically, we hired our first employee who was in Rahima Khan. We hired him on Skype. We didn't have Zoom at the time. And when he was coming in, his parents were quite skeptical in terms of, which company are you joining, and, this is like, you're the first employee there. We actually made him make a passport, and he joined in the first week. We sent him to Singapore for a training. We didn't have the money. We said that, we'll pool the funds and we'll send him for a training. That person stuck around, and it's still, he's now the director of engineering at the moment in our organization. He carried that passion that, every founder had. And when we went out of the way to make sure that he's getting his dose of encouragement and the passion that he has to, give to the employees, he's in turn built a, wonderful, 50+ member engineering firm, which, is able to really, beat a lot of odds in terms of what we deliver. So I think it's these small moments in terms of making that effort early on, going out of the way to hunt for that right passion, the right missionary who's going to be actually running the show. Today, none of the people that we've hired in the first year have left. It's been about 5 years, and they continue to, carry on this mission forward. So it's about a lot of, translating or converting your, hires into refounders and breeding that second lot, because in the 3rd, 4th year, what starts to happen is that when you are a 200-member organization, the founders cannot have enough, limelight with every single member, and you want to have 10 or 15 of these refounders that are able to make sure that the light is lit for every corner of the company.
Thanks, Yasir. Anybody else have anything to add, or should we just move on? Great. So we are actually out of time, but I think we've been a bit behind, so I'm going to take a few extra minutes and ask if anybody has a question. We've got a wealth of amazing people here on stage. I've learned a lot. I think there's a lot to learn. So maybe open it up for a few.
No,
questions.
I'm so sorry.
We cannot do that.
Yeah,
so
I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Monis. Thank you, Yasir, Halima, Meenah, Omair, and Muneeb, for that wonderful, wonderful discussion. A big round of applause. Why don't you all get up for a photo op?